Hi, and welcome back to Football Made Simple. Pep Guardiola faced off against his new nemesis when Manchester City visited Chelsea in the league. Tuchel has had an incredible run against Pep recently and was looking to continue it, but that run came to an end after a 1-0 loss thanks to Gabriel Jesus. The XG showed it was a deserved win, with the XG time map showing just how little Chelsea created even after going behind. But what tactics did both managers use? Let's take a look. A quick reminder of the formations as you can see on the OneFootball app, who are once again kindly sponsoring this video. I've been working with OneFootball for a while, and simply put, it's the best football app around, giving you formations like this, matches, stats, news, and so much more. And you can download it for free through the link in the description below, which also helps support the channel. Some of the analysis will refer to the differences compared to Tuchel and Pep's prior matches, so I'll leave those linked down below. Let's begin with City on the ball, as they dominated, particularly before going ahead. For most of the match, Chelsea didn't press particularly high up, with a passes per defensive action of over 21. In prior matches against City, Chelsea used a front three when defending, and it would be Mount who would drop deeper into the midfield to pick up a pivot, meaning that the two remaining forwards could more aggressively press the two centre-backs man to man. But today, Tuchel used a flatter midfield three, as he may have been worried about City overloading them in the midfield, with Grealish and the fullbacks usually happy to drift central. So this meant the Chelsea midfield couldn't cover the pivot, which has been an important element of Tuchel's success against Pep. So now instead, Lukaku and Werner operated deeper, looking to cover Rodri instead, and Chelsea's midfield's priority was usually on defending the midfielders deeper rather than confronting Rodri. In the first half, they heavily limited City's influence in Zone 14 as a result. But with the centre fairly well protected, we saw the flanks be utilised much more, and the best example of this is the role of Kyle Walker. The City left back usually has more forward licence, whilst Walker tends to be the third centre back in the build-up. But because the two centre backs today weren't under any pressure, with the forwards being much deeper, City didn't need a third centre back, and now both fullbacks were much freer and had licence to push forward. So, with Bernardo and Jesus, City often had a wide triangle on the right, and Rudiger could shift across to try and make it a 3 versus 2, but they would still be outnumbered, and as a result there would be space to look for a cross or a run. Kovacic would often look to come across to cover and make it a 3 versus 3, but with Rudiger having moved across, we at times saw Foden look to make a run into the gap. But City mainly attacked down the left-hand side in different ways, facilitated by Grealish, Cancelo, De Bruyne, and at times Laporte. We could see Grealish pushing off the left-hand side early, and De Bruyne would take up similar regions, so João Cancelo often found himself free. And when given this space, Cancelo was excellent in this game at utilising it to look for dangerous balls into the box. But more often, James or Azpilicueta would be drawn out to Cancelo, forcing the wide centre-back to shift across, creating more room in the half space that a midfield runner could look to attack, leading to good situations. Credit must also be given to Jorginho, who was usually excellent at making this covering run. If De Bruyne was deeper, it would be Grealish instead who got into good 1 versus 1 situations. But when Chelsea were now chasing the game, they tried to be more proactive in dealing with the fullbacks in the build-up. Down the left, Alonso looked to push onto Walker earlier to stop the progression and the overload, but Jesus was willing to hug the touchline initially, meaning that if Rudiger went touch tight, there was a massive gap here to exploit. So instead, he was central initially, allowing Jesus to receive and then have the 1 versus 1. But Chelsea did look dangerous on the break, because with City committing so many men forwards to create overloads, Laporte and Diaz were often isolated against Lukaku and Werner, so longer balls for Lukaku to then play in Werner were a constant danger. But what happened when Chelsea were on the ball? Chelsea looked to utilise their usual build-up shape, but City were excellent in the press, with Jesus coming in off the right-hand side to create a 2 with Foden, ready to pick up the central centre-backs. But Chelsea's back 3 when building up is loaded to the right-hand side, so whilst Jesus could afford to come central, Grealish had to be slightly wider to watch the right centre-back. De Bruyne in the hole would pick up a pivot, whilst Walker could afford to push higher, as there was no centre-back to deal with here. But after trying to play out initially, City's effective pressing forced Chelsea to go long a lot earlier. Even in open play, the wide regions are where City targeted with the press. Foden often looked to filter Chelsea down one direction, and Grealish down the left would push onto Rudiger. Cancelo was also comfortable pushing from left back onto the wing back, forcing Azpilicueta to play backwards, whilst De Bruyne in the hole was covering the ball side pivot. This did potentially leave a gap that Conte could look to exploit, usually to no avail. But when Chelsea play with a front 3, it's harder for teams to press this way, because a Havertz or Mount high would make the fullback hesitant to press, as it would mean the whole back 4 would have to shift. This is actually how Havertz scored the Champions League winning goal. But with only 2 men wide, City were happy to press like this. But because City were aggressive in this lateral press with the far side winger coming narrow, it meant that when Chelsea did manage the switch, there would be acres of space to attack. But high up, where Chelsea are usually able to create problems against City as they would have a 5 versus 4 advantage attacking, now it was harder to outnumber City's defender using only the front 2. It was noticeable how when Havertz came on and he and Werner operated in the half spaces, forcing the fullbacks to play narrower, Azpilicueta had much more room to get crosses in. Overall, this is a deserved win for City, which will give them optimism going forward, and they may be disappointed not to have won by even more, courtesy of the brilliant Mendy. For Chelsea, a loss to the champions isn't the worst result, and will be interesting to see if Tuchel sticks to the front 2 instead of a 3. But what did you make of this match? Drop it down below. A quick shout out to my Patreons for helping to make this video possible. If you want to support, head on over to patreon.com/footballmadesimple and you'll get rewards like early access to videos and exclusive content. And a special thanks to my patrons including Karl Kjellberg, Igor Miljevic and Claire Hegarty. But that's all for today, and remember, keep it simple.